Hi, I'm Alex Schmidt, and once Airbnb ruins your city, your apartment might become a XXX freak fest. In case you don't know what Airbnb is, it's a website where people can list their spare rooms or homes or apartments for short-term rental by other people, along the lines of booking a hotel room. And in 2014, Ari Taman rented out his Manhattan apartment to other people through Airbnb. When he happened to return to it later that night to pick up some luggage, he found condoms, liquor, his own flipped-over furniture, and internet-wide advertising for a $20 per entry orgy. I mean $20 to enter. Nope, still bad phrasing. He got sex bunkered, is the point. But let's handle the larger point. Phrasing again, pushing through it. Airbnb is a global monolith, okay? It's completely unaccountable. It's ruining your city, and if things keep going the way they're going, Airbnb will put you at the risk of a freak festing, whether you like it or not. Airbnb's grown so fast, you can barely call it growth. It's more like that part of the movie Independence Day, where the awesome part happens. Like a creepy, technologically advanced behemoth looming over every major city on Earth, Airbnb arrived and went global before most people had ever heard of it. Really, according to a Pew Internet survey, more than half of Americans still haven't heard of Airbnb, even though it hosted 17 million guests in almost 200 countries last summer. And its growth is relentless. As soon as a country opens its doors to capitalism, like Cuba started to last year, Airbnb is there to literally rent access to the country's doors.
I don't think we've ever had a market grow as fast as Cuba.
Just like eBay changed the yard sale game, and Uber and Lyft changed the taxi game, Airbnb changed the shelter game. And all those companies self-describe as members of the sharing economy. Many of them even believe they are heroes, straight up saving the world by transacting online business. Airbnb co-founder Brian Chesky describes his company's impact as bringing the United Nations to every kitchen table. In his utopian vision, Airbnb's growth is a win-win for everyone on the planet. But as Matt Iglesias pointed out in Slate, the sharing economy isn't built on sharing anything. It's built on paying for things online. That's not a big difference. And it's only nicer than the old economy in the sense that it replaced humans who reject maxed out credit cards with a maxed out credit card rejecting app that's a cute vaginal rectangle. Still, Airbnb changed the hotel business and the real estate business in two ways. Way number one, Airbnb is both a hotel business and a real estate empire. The competition has to be one or the other because of regulations. Way number two, by claiming to be a magical sharesy unicorn instead of a hotel or landlord, Airbnb ducks the hotel and housing taxes, safety requirements, and accountability. Everything bad that can happen in an Airbnb has happened in an Airbnb. Even the baddest bad thing. Death! And you know about Airbnb deaths if you've read that amazing Medium piece about the writer's father's tragic death during their family's Airbnb stay. Or if you read about that time an Airbnb host died and the guest had to discover the body. Or that time an Airbnb guest just kinda found a dead body on the property. But you can't blame Airbnb for any Airbnb death. They rent out hundreds of thousands of rooms worldwide year-round. On average, some deaths will be located in them. The traditional hotel industry has the same problem. Dozens of people die in hotels every year, from everything from carbon monoxide to fires to plain old age. The difference is that a lot of those hotel deaths were disclosed by the hotels, because hotels are accountable. Airbnb isn't accountable to anyone. They're not accountable because technically they facilitate temporary housing rather than operating it. Legally, a homeowner has responsibilities, and someone renting a home has responsibilities. Airbnb defines itself as a middleman, connecting those two people, like a much chiller version of that matchmaker from Mulan. That makes them a new kind of company, which gives them a competitive advantage, and since Airbnb doesn't want to lose that advantage, they fight every government's attempts to regulate chill Mulan matchmakers. For example, New York City was one of the first major Airbnb markets, and New York State's Attorney General put out a damning study of New York City's Airbnb listings. But it didn't come out until October of 2014. That's long after Airbnb, founded in 2008, set up shop in the Big Apple. And the story's even worse across America. Portland finally started regulating Airbnb in 2014. Los Angeles started drafting Airbnb regulations in 2015, and Airbnb worked out a loosening of those mostly unenforced anyway regulations in exchange for a hotel tax deal with the city. Also, the LA encircled city of West Hollywood banned Airbnb, but West Hollywood's steep fines for breaking the ban haven't slowed down the tide of renters there. Chicago started considering Airbnb regulations this year, and Airbnb hired lobbyists to blanket local media with ads attacking Mayor Rahm Emanuel.
I would say to Mayor Emanuel to leave the little guy alone.
They pushed the ads on a scale Chicagoans hadn't seen outside of election campaigning, and they negotiated with the city so aggressively. The mayor's office called Airbnb bullies and threatened to cut off talks. Airbnb smacked down San Francisco's city government even harder. SF got around to regulating Airbnb in 2015 with a renter registry, and only after Airbnb spent $8 million lobbying to make those regulations toothless. As of last year, only a few hundred Airbnb renters were registered with the city of San Francisco like they're legally supposed to be, and why would they? SF's failing to make Airbnb stop listing those unregistered apartments. Bottom line, if you're an American, your city either started regulating Airbnb about 7 years too late or hasn't regulated it at all, and your federal government's even further behind. A couple of Democratic senators said the US government should start to regulate Airbnb a couple weeks ago. Not change how they regulate it, start to bother to. But foreign folks, don't you get smug, all right? And remain proud. Symbolic bald eagle, because the rest of the world sucks at this too. The European Union started thinking about Airbnb regulations this summer, and while they did nothing, Berlin mostly banned it. Barcelona recently fined Airbnb and is considering a ban. Iceland's about to regulate it much more heavily. Paris encourages residents to rat out their neighbors for illegal Airbnb hosting, as if that'll help. And outside the EU, Airbnb is facing everything from a shutdown of 95% of their listings in Taipei, to legal challenges across Australia and a shutdown of its alleged party houses outside Sydney, to a proposed Japanese law that would make almost all Airbnb rentals illegal nationwide. But again, all that regulation is recent. For the past 7 or 8 years, Airbnb has been self-regulating. Also, today's Airbnb fights those governments with hired Airbnb lobbyists, but tomorrow they might incite your neighbors into doing it for them. Airbnb is founding home-sharing clubs for its renters in cities worldwide. They're aiming to have them in 100 cities by the end of this year. And the company says the clubs are organic, but the company also hired over 100 mobilization team members and digital engagement experts to pump them up while coordinating them through an Airbnb supervised online forum. And when it comes to tackling the garden variety awful stuff regulations should prevent, Airbnb problems only get fixed once those problems at best ruin someone's fun vacation. Airbnb didn't just change the accountability game by avoiding it. They flipped the old model, the one that protected your safety, and switched it to a model where things get fixed after you get broken. As venture capitalist Nick Grossman has pointed out, the traditional regulatory model is based on a lot of earned accountability up front, followed by looser oversight afterward. So somebody running a hotel might get lazy down the line. You know, they might not quite keep a bed or two clean, or might leave a dead body or two in their water tank for a week or two, or 3, or a lot. But the old system forces hotel owners to prove they're capable of running a decent hotel up front. It also allows for future inspections to keep them on point. But sharing economy companies like Uber and Airbnb want a lot of drivers and hosts. They can't start making money without that. So they let anyone sign up and start driving/hosting, then do the accountability part later on. And all the accountability comes down to reviews. But that means Airbnb can only improve the renting experience after the renting experience is terrible for somebody and gets reviewed poorly. And that system fails because bad Airbnb reviews are incredibly rare. Boston University studied Airbnb ratings and found that 95% of listings got a review of 4.5 stars or 5 stars. Perfect rating or close to it. You see the same thing with Airbnb's sharing economy buddy Uber. A driver gets booted out of that system for a rating of 4.6 because the company knows overall driver ratings are really generous. And all those people handing out nothing but perfect scores, like some kind of "oh captain, my captain" teacher who doesn't believe in grades, man, probably mean well. The people behind that BU study say that when we rate other people, we are more charitable. That sometimes when we're rating a service, we're actually rating the person. And when somebody helps us crash in their place, we feel weird being picky about that, even if we're paying them, money. But then that creates a world where, as far as bad Airbnb experiences go, you're actually better off if your Airbnb experience is so bad it's national news. When that guy in Manhattan got XXX freak-fested, Airbnb immediately provided him with a locksmith and a week of hotel accommodations and thousands of dollars in damages. But in every other case, Airbnb relies on bad ratings, a thing none of us are psychologically capable of giving them, to hold renters accountable. So nothing gets fixed. It's like living in a world where the fire department only responds to carrier pigeons. Your living situation is screwed unless you're real specific and weird. Also, speaking of screwed apartments, Airbnb rents nightly rooms. So does a hotel. But the big question isn't whether Airbnb is killing hotels. Sure, they might be. Airbnb has the footprint of 4 Marriott hotel chains put together. They've got the bandwidth to destroy the hotel industry. However, in 2014, Airbnb's founder said as far as hotels go, quote, "We are not seeking to go to war." However, that same year, he used his girlfriend's photo sharing app to publicly post a love note reading, quote, "Fuck hotels." And last year, when Airbnb was fighting with the city of San Francisco, they ran such creepy, cruel anti-hotel ads all over town down, Airbnb ended up apologizing for it to their own employees. But unless you're one of America's most powerful hotel magnates, or the next president of these United States, you don't care if Airbnb kills hotels. Why should you? What you should care about is whether Airbnb makes neighborhoods unaffordable, because Airbnb is letting a handful of people eat up the entire housing market in America's biggest cities. Places to live cost money. Specifically, they cost what people will pay, and since running an Airbnb is profitable, people will pay a lot of money for an apartment you could have made your home if they can turn it into a room of their personal secret distributed hotel. And the law isn't stopping that, even if it ought to. In 2014, New York State found that 72% of all Airbnb listings in New York City were breaking the law, mainly hotel-related laws that also impact the commercial ownership of heaps of Airbnbs.
People becoming entrepreneurs and renting 1 to 100 apartments, claiming that they're their own homes and turning them into ongoing illegal hotel arrangements.
In fact, the Attorney General's report found while only 6% of Airbnb hosts advertise 3 or more listings, they account for more than a third of Airbnb's business in New York.
And it's a lot of business. From 2011 to 2013, the city's top 40 hosts on Airbnb made over $400,000 apiece, for a combined total of $35 million. One individual renter managed 272 properties and made $6.8 million in less than 5 years. Now, you could say Airbnb isn't directly responsible for any of these commercial renters. You know, their platform allows this to happen, incredibly profitably, but they're not aiding and abetting these people, except for how they are doing that. Less than a year ago, Airbnb self-reported their New York City data and said 99% of their NYC listings are people renting out their own home. But then they were forced to admit that they quietly removed 1,500 commercial listings from that data set before generating that percentage, because it would have made that percentage lower, like hella lower, man. Also, those commercial renters signed right back up for Airbnb's service. And commercial Airbnb rentals aren't just taking over New York. In many LA neighborhoods, Airbnb rentals are now 4 to 7% of all housing units. And it's estimated that 35% of all Southern California Airbnb revenue goes to people renting more than 1 unit. San Francisco is already short on housing, which is part of why it's the country's most expensive place to live. Thanks to commercial Airbnb hosts, we know hundreds and possibly thousands of San Francisco housing units are now secret hotel rooms instead of homes. The moment Airbnb became a phenomenon, literally every landlord on earth faced a choice. Rent to one person at a monthly rate, or rent to nightly internet strangers and make more money, either totally legally or with less illegal maneuvering than it takes to steal Game of Thrones. Even the city of San Francisco, which wants to convince landlords to not be digital hotel tycoons, admits they can make what they'd make from a year-round tenant in just 257 days of Airbnb renting. And they'll hit that number in a big appealing city like SF. And since landlords like income, you see stories about people like Chris Butler, who was evicted after 10 years of living in his San Francisco apartment, allegedly because his landlord's spouse needed to live there. Butler then found the unit listed on Airbnb at more than double the per night rent he was paying. You also find stories about landlords who allegedly hopped on the vacation rental gravy train by evicting disabled tenants. And the more Airbnb grows, the more cities' supplies of regular housing shrink. The more the housing supply shrinks, the more housing prices rise. It happens everywhere, from big cities like New York to little cities like Marfa, Texas, where Airbnb rentals helped more than double housing prices in just 13 years. So very quietly, all over the world, local residents are watching their city give them that speech from The Departed.
And to make more fucking money. This is America. You don't make money, you're a fucking douchebag. Now what you gonna do?
And the scariest thing is that Airbnb is the cause of, and solution to, and worsening cause of that problem. Maybe you're an Airbnb host already. If you are, you're probably one of thousands of regular people who are trying to stay in their homes.
Financially, it really helps my family. Rents here have skyrocketed in the 10 years that we've been here.
That cost hike is hitting America's whole middle class, and they aren't making the extra salary they need to keep up with it, but probably are making enough of a salary to let them rent or own a decent home, the kind of home that makes for a nice Airbnb listing. But Airbnb is a big part of why urban housing prices are rising. It's not the only factor. Gentrification is the most famous one. There are also wealthy foreigners buying up housing all over, from Chinese buyers in Canada and Australia, to Russian buyers in the UK, to South American buyers in South Florida. But Airbnb's gig economy creates a systematized housing price hike. for every neighborhood on Earth, which means you need extra income to keep living there. And unless you can multiplicity yourself into a few extra jobs, your best option for an extra income stream to fix the problem Airbnb created is renting on Airbnb. And that's even more of a problem if you experience day-to-day prejudice. The sharing economy is a perfect platform for our existing prejudices and racism, because Airbnb renters and guests are judged by their face and potentially ethnic name. Studies find black hosts and guests have a demonstrably harder time on Airbnb. Same goes for the LGBT community. Fair housing laws can't protect Airbnb renters from nutty afraid people. And to Airbnb's credit, they just hired Eric Holder, our most recent ex-US Attorney General, to work on that diversity problem. What a get. But you have to wonder if Airbnb's hoping he finds a solution that's regulation-free, or a solution that doesn't force them to change the fundamentals of their service. Because if Airbnb is anything like Uber, it might not see their service's negative impact as something they're responsible for fixing. Look what Uber CEO Travis Kalanick said on national television, you guys, about Uber's plan to switch over to self-driving cars.
Google's doing the driverless thing.
Yeah.
Tesla's doing the driverless thing. Apple's doing the driverless thing. This is going to be the world. And so the question for a tech company is, do you want to be part of the future, or do you want to resist the future?
Even his answer to a question about driverless cars is driverless. Because in his unavoidable, inevitable, unstoppable the world which specific companies are building super on purpose, human beings are chips that will fall where they may. Don't get me wrong, the people behind Airbnb probably aren't evil. If anything, they're tangibly good. All three of Airbnb's founders promised to donate more than half their personal wealth to charity in their lifetimes. But when the source of those founders' wealth is reshaping our cities and kicking more and more of us out of them, will Airbnb help us all continue to, belong? Or will they see it like Uber sees the driverless thing, a sweeping trend that somebody else would have wrecked the world real estate market with anyway? So why feel guilty about spearheading it and cashing in and letting a stranger Independence Day freak fest the White House? Metaphorically. Unless Trump rents out one of the bedrooms. Or all the bedrooms. I hope he doesn't think of that. He probably hadn't until I brought it up, so I'm sorry, Abe. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe and do all the YouTube things. In the comments, let us know if I can stay with you. I could use a place, and between staying in hotels and trying to hang out places, I like meeting people.